Wednesday, 17th of December, 1930. Dear Bob, just a few lines from your old mam. And I mean old, very old. Your birthday card arrived. I was so pleased that you remembered. I love Patience Strong's verses. Jimmy saw your card and asked me how old I was. 21, says me. 21, says he, a look of amazement on his face. You're very old, aren't you? I gave him one of my cutting looks. I can see a bit of your dad in that boy. We found a good way of getting him clean, though. A pal of your dad's who works at the Synthetic gave your dad a bottle of ammonia. You put a drop in the bathwater. It stinks the place out, but it doesn't half bring the muck off our Jimmy. Tatarpet called last night for the insurance money, as usual. He'd just called at Mrs. Turnbull's, and she gave him a glass of a rhubarb wine. Well, he was so enthusiastic about it and telling her how good it was that she gave him another glass. Your dad says he thinks she puts dynamite in it. Anyway, when Tatarpet came in here, you could see he was knock-kneed, cross-eyed, and his arithmetic wasn't up to its usual standard. When he went out of the door, I stood on the steps to watch him go down our path to the gate. The bobby was coming down the street, and he got off his bike and watched Tatarpet trying to get on his. I shouted to your dad to come out and rescue him, or he'd finish under the clock for the night. So your dad came out, got Tatarpet's bicycle clips, hung them over the handlebars, put the bike in our back arch, and Tatarpet wobbled off down the street on the rest of his round. Wednesday, 18th of February, 1931. Dear Bob, just a line hoping you are well. It's very cold here. I was woken up at about 6 o'clock this morning by hailstones rattling on the window. It made me shiver and pull the blankets up around my neck. Your dad didn't hear a thing. What hailstones, he said. There's snow on the hills. It makes them look grand, distant, like a grand stand looking over the town. We'll go up there in late summer and pick bilberries and brambles, but just now, I think I'll stay around the fire. Jimmy had to go to school in it. I feel sorry for the kids, having to walk all the way to Martin Grove School in bad weather. Still, it's for their own good. They're paying the musicians off in Middlesbrough. It's the talkies that's doing it. They don't want musicians in the picture houses anymore. They were getting 6 guineas a week. I never dreamed they were getting that much. What I couldn't do with 6 guineas a week. I'd better shut up before I start spending it. Some good news for a change. I don't know if you know Mrs. Sanderson. Lives in Meadowfield? Mr. Sanderson knows your dad. They both work at Smith's Dock. Well, Mrs. Sanderson had been working for Mrs. Levinson, who lives in Cornfield Road, cleaning 1 day a week. Mrs. Sanderson got another job at the Palladium, and she gave up a job with Mrs. Levinson. And Mrs. Levinson asked her if she could recommend anybody for the job, and she gave her my name. So I went round and I got started straight away. I was honest with her, and I told her we're on the dole, She said, that's all right. She understands. And if Dracula from the public assistance comes round, she'll straighten him out. She's a big conservative. And your dad didn't like that when I told him. But I said, who does he think he's working for when he works in the shipyard? So that's the good news. I've been there twice now. The Liberals have just said that if they become the government, they'll spend money on new housing and railways and canals and docks. That seems sensible to my simple way of seeing things. But your dad doesn't trust them, so he'll be working on me. Mrs. Levinson doesn't trust them, so she'll be working on me. And that only leaves your granddad. He is a Liberal. He won't work on me. He'll just tell me what to do, just like he tells your grandma. It isn't easy having the vote. John Bowles is on at the Palladium the back half of this week. He's a lovely singer. I think I'll whisper sweet nothings in your dad's ear and I might strike lucky. On the other hand, he might start singing. He'll have to think it through. Your loving Mam. P.S. Your dad's just come in whistling Keep Your Feet Still, Geordie Hinney. Newcastle, 0. Borough, 5. Wednesday, 4th of March, 1931. Dear Bob, there's been blood on the moon in Hartlepool, and amongst our betters. The ex-mayor has been sued by his wife for desertion. He says she hit him with a stick and chased him into the street with a bacon knife. These are the people who want to run the town. There's been ructions in our house as well. I've been asking your dad to paint a moustache on so I can see what he'd look like. But he won't. I think he'd look like a film star. Anyway, yesterday, he fell asleep in his chair. He'd been out all night with Sam Maynard. They didn't catch anything. I got Jimmy's paint box out and painted a moustache on him. It didn't look very good and I had it a bit skew whiff, so I thought I'd better wipe it off before he woke up. I was just bending over him with a damp cloth. What you doing? He said. I said he was sweating. And I was going to wipe the sweat off his face. He asked me what time it was and I said 2:20. He nearly went through the roof. I'll be late for the meeting, he shouted and jumped up, grabbed his cap and coat and was out of the door before you could say Jack Robinson. Without even looking in the mirror. I looked out of the window and saw him rushing out of our gate. Mrs. Callahan was coming down the street and she gave him a funny look. But he just rushed past and disappeared, heading for Stan Cole's shed. I wasn't looking forward to him coming back in again. When he did come in, you should have heard him. You know your dad doesn't swear in the house and would never swear in front of women, but he's putting that dictionary to good use. That was yesterday. Today, he's seen me writing this letter, so as per usual, he's asked for a PS. I said, well, what about the moustache? And he said he'd forget it. And I said, how about forgiving? And he said he knew people who said they would forgive somebody, but then they keep remembering and getting worked up about it. So where does forgiving end and forgetting begin? Your ever-loving mum. P.S. Borough 5, Leeds 0. Camsell scored 4.
He only grumbled when they tried bobbing his brush.
Saturday, May 16th, 1931. Dear Bob, our Jimmy's just been in with one of his jokes. Ma'am, who's the only Middlesbrough international to score for England in his bare feet? I racked my brains. I give in. Jack Hatfield. I see that Jack has just scored 4 goals for Middlesbrough at water polo. But I wasn't thinking about that. I'd noticed our Jimmy's jersey. It was a mess. A brand new jersey. The boys had found an old motor tyre and our Jimmy curled up inside it and they rolled him up and down the street in it. I tried to give him a clip, but he ducked. So I sent him to bed and I said if men and women in Aldgate Workhouse have to go to bed at 7, he could. Your dad took me to the Scaler to see Three Faces East. I wondered why he was taking me all the way down the town to the Scaler. Then I found out. Constance Bennett was in it. She was a spy disguised as a nurse. I don't know who your dad's disguised as, but he gives me some good laughs. Thursday, 2nd of July, 1931. Dear Bob, I'd been reading the soap advertisements. Palm olive soap. Keep that schoolgirl complexion. 4pence halfpenny a tablet. I asked your dad for 4pence halfpenny to get my schoolgirl complexion back, but he said he thought I still had my schoolgirl complexion. It's amazing what 4pence halfpenny will do for a man. So I looked at the Co-op. That's cheaper and better. CWS bath soap. You rise from your bath refreshed and rejuvenated after contact with CWS bath soap. It's tinted and perfumed. That sounds like me. I mean, it sounds like my style. But your dad wouldn't budge. He said I'm rejuvenated enough. In fact, I'm exotic. He's up to the E's in his dictionary. The man who was in charge of building the Sydney Bridge has just come home. The bridge has been joined up across the water and will be opened next year. It makes you proud to come from Middlesbrough, and this is our centenary year as well. I've bought a centenary medal for you and for Jimmy. Sir Hugh Bell has just died. He was going to go to the opening of the bridge. I think it's a shame he's missed it. I know we all have to die sometime, but after all he's done for the town, it does seem wrong to die at this time. Thursday, 10th of September, 1931. Dear Bob, we've had terrible floods here. Not so bad as Ayton and Stokesley, but bad enough. The Vale and Deepdale were flooded and the Palladium had to be pumped out. The kids loved it, of course. Guess who came home with his boots and stockings soaking wet through? I was talking to your dad about getting a wireless set. They cost 19 guineas, and you can get one on the Never Never for 5 shillings a week, but your dad doesn't want to go into debt. And we can't really afford 5 shillings anyway. I was only dreaming, really. So it's back to Jimmy on his mouth organ, and me on the bazooka, and your dad singing. When we can get his nose out of his dictionary, that is. Crime is on the increase. Not in Grove Hill, I'm pleased to say. The police have set up a mobile force in Middlesbrough with a speed patrol. There's a picture in the Gazette of the Chief Constable inspecting a 3-wheeler motor car. There's mixed bathing in Middlesbrough now. The corporation are extending the swimming baths, so there'll be a new baths and the old baths in the same building. Jack Hatfield has a lot to do with it. I think Jack Hatfield must be one of the most popular men in this town. A real hero. And the Middlesbrough Swimming Club are giving lessons to people who can't swim. Jimmy and some of the other boys from Sunnyside go every Saturday morning. Well, that's all. So ta-ra for now, as they say down in Newport. Your loving Mam. P.S. Your dad and me tossed up for whether he could have a P.S. He won. I have an idea he cheated. I don't know how he did it, but I would like to get a look at that penny. Anyway, West Ham 0. Middlesbrough 2. Camsell and Cameron scored. Monday, 30th of November, 1931. Dear Bob, Father Christmas has arrived at Newhouses, so the shops are gearing up for Christmas. But it'll not be a good one for many people. The Gazette says hundreds of thousands of unemployed voted for the national government, so they voted for a reduction in their incomes. Well, your dad didn't vote for them, and Stan Cole's shed didn't vote for them, and I didn't vote for them, although your grandma and granddad did. Your dad says those who did vote for them thought they were voting for jobs and higher wages. At least that's his experience, talking to a lot of them at the meetings of the Unemployed Association. The general I told you about, who said we'd be having a war in 20 years, has been proved right. The papers are saying 3,000 Chinese people have been killed by Japanese aeroplanes. It is all very worrying. I hope you are not going to be sent out there. Double-decker buses are taking over from trams, so that's going to make it easier to get down the town from Grove Hill. If we can afford the fares, that is. Tatar Pet told me that the HMS Norfolk was the ship where the Navy mutiny started. He knows this is the ship you were on, because I told him. He said the leaders had been dismissed from the Navy. Is that true? You never mentioned it in your letters. Sylvia was here when Tata Pet was telling me this, so she is worried. She says you never mentioned it to her either. I hope you two are getting on well. She's a lovely girl. Your ever-loving Mam. P.S. West Bromwich Albion 1, Borough 1.
So now we must bid them all adieu.
Saturday, 12th of December, 1931. Dear Bob, here I am again, hoping that you are well, and to tell you some good news we've just had. Furness Shipyard has got a contract for an oil tanker for a Canadian firm. Your dad was tipped off about it and got over there sharp, and he has to start on Monday. It'll only be for this one ship, but hopefully they'll get more orders next year. I can't tell you what a relief it is, and just in time for Christmas. Sylvia was here and I was doing her hair when Stan Cole and your dad walked in. Stan Cole was complaining about the unions accepting a wage cut for dockers. I asked Stan what he thought of Mr. Hitler in Germany. He seems to be saying the same things as Stan. I thought Stan would explode. He said, "Hitler is a fascist." I asked him what that was, and he said that when Hitler speaks, everybody else has to shut up. That sounds like Stan, though I didn't say so. Instead, I said, well, when he shuts up, everybody else can have their say. You can't have everybody talking at once. "The difficulty with that," said Stan, "is that Hitler never stops talking." Whatever they say about the rich of this town think of the town and do good things for it. There's a list in the Gazette. Albert Park, Stewart's Park, Pallister Park, the Dorman Museum, Constantine College, Carter Bequest Hospital. Now, Colonel Poole has bought Grey Towers, which was Sir Arthur Dorman's house, and given it to Middlesbrough. He didn't have to do that. Your dad'll say, where did he get the money from? But that doesn't change the fact that he didn't have to give it, and he was thinking of the town and not himself. And that's more than can be said for some of the Labour Party people. We have a lot to be proud of and thankful for in our town. Tata Pet sends his regards. Your ever-loving Mam. P.S. Everton 5, Borough 1. We're in mourning, but at least your dad has got a job.